The Armored Van Heist. On November 5, 2009, in Lyon, France, a security driver named Tony Mousseline executed what would become one of the most audacious heists in French history. Mousseline was no criminal mastermind or hardened gangster. He was just an ordinary 49-year-old security van driver who had worked for the Loomis Security Company for over a decade. On that autumn day, Mousseline was assigned to pick up cash from the Bank of France with two colleagues. After completing the pickup of $11.6 million, approximately $17.1 million at the time, or about $24 million today, Mousseline's colleagues briefly stepped out of the vehicle. In that moment, Mousseline made his move. Unlike most heists that involve elaborate planning, disguises, or weapons, Mousseline simply drove away with the armored van and the fortune inside. No violence, no accomplices, no sophisticated technology. He just drove off while his colleagues were distracted, abandoning the vehicle later in a quiet suburb of Lyon and transferring the money to another vehicle he had prepared. The security company quickly realized what had happened and alerted authorities, but Mousseline had already vanished. What made this heist particularly fascinating was that Mousseline had spent years complaining about his low salary and poor working conditions. He earned roughly $1,800, about $2,600 per month, a modest sum for someone who transported millions daily. Many viewed him not as a criminal, but as a working-class hero taking a stand against corporate greed. You see, Mousseline had meticulously planned his disappearance. He had terminated his apartment lease days before, cleaned out his bank accounts, and told acquaintances he was going on vacation. The French police launched a massive manhunt, and Interpol issued an international arrest warrant as authorities searched across Europe. But here's where things get interesting. 10 days after the heist, police discovered $9.1 million, about $13.4 million, in a storage garage Mousseline had rented in the city of Lyon. The money was still in its original security bags, neatly stacked, but $2.5 million was mysteriously missing. Had Mousseline planned to return for the cash? Was this part of a larger scheme? No one knew. After 11 days on the run, Mousseline suddenly surrendered to police in Monaco, claiming he wanted to teach his employer a lesson and get away from it all. He refused to reveal the location of the missing millions, which to this day have never been recovered. In 2010, Mousseline was sentenced to just 5 years in prison, a surprisingly light sentence for the scale of the theft. He was released after serving only 4 years and has maintained his silence about the missing money. The Armored Van Heist captivated the French public, with many viewing Mousseline as a folk hero who had outwitted the system, even if only temporarily. In the end, his simple yet audacious plan almost worked perfectly, and somewhere $2.5 million in cash might still be waiting to be found. The Skyjacker Who Vanished. On November 24, 1971, a man who purchased his airline ticket under the name Dan Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. He was one of just 36 passengers on that Boeing 727 flight. The man appeared to be in his mid-40s, wearing a business suit, black tie, and white shirt. Nothing about him seemed suspicious or noteworthy. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to Florence Schaffner, one of the flight attendants. Thinking it was a business card or perhaps his phone number, she slipped it into her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned over and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." When she read the note, it stated he had a bomb in his briefcase. When Schaffner sat beside him as instructed, he opened his briefcase, revealing what appeared to be a mass of wires and red cylinders. His demands were clear and precise: $200,000 in used $20 bills, equivalent to about $1.4 million today, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft. The airline quickly agreed to his demands. When the plane landed in Seattle, Cooper released all 36 passengers and some of the crew, but kept the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and 1 flight attendant on board. The FBI delivered the money and parachutes, and Cooper instructed the pilot to fly toward Mexico City at the unusually low altitude of 10,000 feet at a slow airspeed of 200 miles per hour. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, in the darkness and heavy rain, Cooper did something that no one had successfully done before or since. He lowered the aft stairs of the Boeing 727, a feature he seemed to know the plane had, and parachuted out of the back of the commercial airliner with $200,000 strapped to his body. He jumped into a freezing rainstorm over heavily forested terrain wearing only his business suit and loafers. What makes this heist truly astonishing is that Cooper was never found, dead or alive. The FBI launched one of the most massive manhunts in American history. Over 800 civilians and soldiers searched the likely landing zones on foot. Aircraft with infrared sensors scanned thousands of acres of forest. Nothing substantial was discovered. You see, the only confirmed piece of evidence ever found came 9 years later when a young boy digging on a Columbia River beach uncovered 3 bundles of the ransom money, $5,800 in deteriorated $20 bills, the serial numbers match those of Cooper's ransom. For 45 years, the FBI actively investigated the case, following countless leads and developing numerous theories, but never identifying the Skyjacker with certainty. In 2000, they officially suspended the investigation. To this day, no one knows if Cooper survived the jump, died in the attempt, or disappeared into the shadows with his fortune. The legend of D.B. Cooper, a name mistakenly used by the media, has grown into American folklore. The daring criminal who outsmarted authorities and vanished into the night, becoming perhaps the most successful air pirate in aviation history, the Mona Lisa swipe. On Monday, August 21st, 1911, the Louvre Museum in Paris opened its doors as usual. But something was different. Visitors wandered the gallery where Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece, the Mona Lisa, was displayed, only to find an empty space with 4 iron pegs sticking out of the wall. Museum officials initially believed the painting had been removed for photography, but a quick check confirmed everyone's worst fears. The world's most famous painting had vanished without a trace. The thief was Vincenzo Peruggia, a 32-year-old Italian handyman who had been employed at the Louvre to install protective glass cases over valuable artworks, including the very painting he would later steal. Peruggia had spent time studying the museum's security protocols and routines, knowledge that would prove invaluable in executing his audacious plan. The theft itself was shockingly simple. On Sunday, August 20th, Peruggia entered the museum during regular visiting hours wearing his white worker's smock, the same uniform worn by museum employees. He hid in a broom closet until the museum closed. In the quiet hours of early Monday morning, he emerged and made his way to the Salon Carré where the Mona Lisa hung. He removed the painting from the wall, took it to a nearby stairwell, and carefully removed the protective glass case he himself had installed. You see, what made this heist remarkable was not its complexity, but its simplicity. Peruggia simply removed the painting from its frame, wrapped it in his white smock, and when the museum opened Monday morning, walked out the same door he had entered, carrying the Mona Lisa under his clothes. No alarm sounded. No guard stopped him. A worker even unlocked a door for him when he couldn't open it, while carrying his concealed treasure. The theft triggered the first international art crime investigation in history. The borders of France were sealed. All ships and trains were searched. The police questioned and fingerprinted museum employees, including Peruggia, but failed to connect him to the crime. For over 2 years, the Mona Lisa's whereabouts remained a complete mystery as theories multiplied. Some believed it had been stolen by a sophisticated ring of art thieves. Others thought American collectors had arranged the theft. Pablo Picasso was even briefly considered a suspect. All along, the Mona Lisa sat in a trunk in Peruggia's small apartment in Paris, just a few blocks from the museum. Peruggia's downfall came in December 1913 when, believing enough time had passed, he traveled to Florence, Italy and contacted an art dealer named Alfredo Geri. Peruggia revealed he had the painting and wanted to return it to its rightful homeland of Italy, believing it had been stolen by Napoleon. He was asking for a 500,000 lire reward, about $100,000 today. The dealer, along with the director of the Uffizi Gallery, authenticated the painting and promptly alerted the authorities. Peruggia was arrested and eventually served just 7 months in prison for what remains one of the most famous art heists in history. Ironically, his theft transformed the Mona Lisa from merely one of many masterpieces into the world's most recognizable painting, the Lottery Code Hacker. In 2005, the Multi-State Lottery Association, which runs some of America's biggest lottery games including Powerball and Mega Millions, hired a new security director named Eddie Tipton. With his extensive background in computer programming and cybersecurity, Tipton was entrusted with protecting the lottery's random number generators, the very machines that determine winning combinations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. What no one knew was that Tipton would exploit this position to pull off one of the most sophisticated and long-running heists in American gambling history, a scheme that would ultimately net him and his accomplices millions in fraudulent lottery winnings across multiple states. Tipton's genius lay in how he compromised the supposedly tamper-proof system. As security director, he had rare access to the locked room that housed the random number generators. In 2005, he installed a self-destructing rootkit, a piece of malicious code, into the lottery computers. This code would only activate on 3 specific days of the year, November 23rd, December 29th, and May 27th, and only if the draw occurred on certain days of the week. When these specific conditions were met, the code wouldn't select truly random numbers, but instead would generate predictable number combinations that Tipton had memorized. The code was designed to delete itself after running, leaving no trace of manipulation. This meant that for most of the year, the lottery systems operated normally, a clever tactic that helped avoid detection. You see, Tipton couldn't claim the winning tickets himself, as lottery employees were prohibited from playing. So he recruited a network of friends and family members, including his brother Tommy Tipton and friend Robert Rhodes, to purchase tickets with the predicted numbers and claim the prizes. For years, they successfully claimed winnings across Colorado, Wisconsin, Kansas, Iowa, and Oklahoma. The scheme began to unravel in December 2010, when a $16.5 million hot lotto jackpot was claimed in Iowa. The ticket was presented by attorneys representing a trust in Belize just hours before the prize would have expired. This suspicious timing and the elaborate attempts to conceal the winner's identity triggered an investigation. Security footage from the convenience store where the winning ticket was purchased showed a hooded figure buying the ticket. Despite the person's attempt to conceal their identity, several colleagues recognized Eddie Tipton in the grainy video. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered a pattern of suspicious wins connected to Tipton's associates. Eventually, the full scope of the scheme came to light. A criminal enterprise that had successfully predicted and claimed at least 7 rigged lottery drawings across 5 states, collecting millions in fraudulent prizes. In 2000, Tipton pleaded guilty to ongoing criminal conduct charges. He was sentenced to up to 25 years in prison, though he was granted parole after serving just 4 years. The total amount stolen through the scheme is estimated to be around $24 million, equivalent to about $30 million today. The lottery code hack revealed frightening vulnerabilities in systems we assumed were impenetrable. It wasn't sophisticated external hackers who compromised the lottery. It was the very person charged with protecting it, a trusted insider who knew exactly where to plant the seeds of corruption. The Telex Trick. On October 25, 1978, in Los Angeles, California, a 34-year-old computer consultant named Stanley Mark Rifkin pulled off what was, at that time, the largest bank theft in American history. What made this heist extraordinary was that Rifkin stole $10.2 million, equivalent to about $46 million today, without using a weapon, without threatening anyone, and without even touching the money physically. Rifkin was a freelance computer consultant who had been hired by Security Pacific National Bank to develop a backup system for their wire transfer operations. During this consulting work, he gained intimate knowledge of the bank's operations, particularly their wire transfer procedures and security protocols. On that October day, Rifkin walked into the bank wearing a business suit, looking like any other professional consultant. He casually made his way to the wire transfer room, a secured area where he had legitimate access due to his consulting work. There, he observed the day's security code being used for wire transfers, a code that changed daily. After memorizing the security code, Rifkin went to a different floor of the bank and entered an empty office. He picked up a phone and called the wire transfer room, identifying himself as Mike Hansen from the bank's international division. Using the security code he had memorized and the wire transfer procedures he had learned, Rifkin authorized a transfer of $10.2 million to an account at Irving Trust in New York. From there, the money was wired to the Vauchard Handelsbank in Zurich, Switzerland. You see, the beauty of this heist was in its simplicity. No alarms were triggered because no security protocols were breached. The bank employees followed their standard procedures, believing they were processing a legitimate transfer. By the time the bank realized the money was missing, Rifkin was already in Switzerland. In Zurich, Rifkin used the stolen money to purchase 43,200 raw diamonds, worth about $8.2 million. His plan was to smuggle these much more portable assets back into the United States and gradually convert them to cash, a scheme that would be virtually untraceable. The perfect heist began to unravel when Rifkin made a critical mistake. He couldn't resist bragging about his achievement to his attorney, who subsequently reported him to the FBI. When agents arrested Rifkin in Carlsbad, California, just 12 days after the heist, they found the diamonds hidden in a safety deposit box. Rifkin was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison but served less than half of that time. The bank recovered almost all of the stolen diamonds, but the case exposed alarming vulnerabilities in banking security systems. The Telex Trick, as it became known, forced banks around the world to completely rethink their wire transfer security protocols. It demonstrated that in the emerging digital age, the most dangerous bank robbers weren't necessarily armed criminals, but rather those who understood the systems and could manipulate them from within.